Hey guys, this is Chris from The Blazing Show with Chris, and I'm here with Joe Banister, and he used to work for the IRS. So, Joe, you there?
Hi, Chris.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, you mean on the air? We're starting.
Yeah, yeah. Joe Banister, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. I'm 51 years old, just about 52, and I spent about 5.5 years working as an IRS criminal investigator. The formal term is special agent. The IRS has all kinds of agents that conduct its business, but the criminal investigator component or division is staffed with about 3,000 special agents, and so that's what I did for about almost 5.5 years, and I left because of some nasty fraud that I discovered they were up to. I worked there from 1993 through 1999.
Wow. So, well, talk about your experience working as a tax expert. You also know a lot about taxes.
Yeah, I graduated in 1986 with a degree in accounting from San Jose State University, and then I worked in the private sector from about 1987 through 1993, and I also became a certified public accountant in 1991. I was in a CPA for about 15 years, no longer a CPA now. And then, like I say, from 1993 through 1999, worked at the IRS as a special agent. So I've had certainly quite a bit of training and experience in taxation over the last 25, 30 years, capping it off with 5 years as a gun-carrying, badge-carrying IRS special agent.
Wow, yeah, that works. Can you talk about the Federal Reserve, because we're in debt to them, because they're looting the country, etc.
That's very true, and this is something that I really wasn't aware of. I went through your mainstream schooling just like anyone else. Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, and then on to state city college, actually, a junior college in San Jose, California, and then San Jose State University. And throughout that entire education process, it was never really explained to me how the monetary system works, about the Federal Reserve and what it was. And I don't think that was a mistake or just some happenstance. I think that it's actually purposeful that young people aren't really taught about the monetary system, or if they are, they're not really told the truth about the way it came about. So when I was investigating the income tax system while I was an IRS special agent, I learned or realized that the monetary system administered by the Federal Reserve is married, in a sense. It's joined at the hip with the income tax system. And actually, I don't know, if your listeners may be well aware that the Federal Reserve Act was passed into law
1913, and it was not even drafted in Congress, written in Jekyll Island by a bunch of billionaires, and eventually this for 100 years. That's despicable, because they're basically, it's like looting the country. We're in debt to them from fiat money that have thin air, and wow.
Right, and both the income tax and the Federal Reserve came into being in 1913, and it wasn't a coincidence. They both work together. They have to, because the Federal Reserve System, being a central banking kind of monetary system, it prints money, as you say, out of thin air. It lends money into existence.
Oh,
And the
ridiculous.
money, if money's being lent, it has to be borrowed by somebody. Somebody's expected to pay it back or something,
We're not gonna
and
pay that back though. It's
that
like
something is
derivatives.
the U.S. government.
Yep.
And of course, we as taxpayers are expected to ultimately foot the bill with our hard earned money, our sweat and our blood.
Wow, and even Henry Ford was it that said the quote, if everybody knew how the banking monetary system was like if everybody knew how it works, like we would be like chased down to the streets and something about and lynch or something like that. It was Henry Ford.
Yeah, there'd be a revolution before
Oh
tomorrow morning.
yeah, revolution by morning. Oh, well, and even Alan Greenspan said on NewsHour, there's no relation, no agency, not even Congress that can overrule the Federal Reserve.
Yes, I saw that particular interview, and it was very telling. Alan Greenspan even wrote books before he became Federal Reserve Chairman, championing the value of gold, and gold as a gold-based monetary system. But somehow somebody, I guess, paid him enough or gave him enough opportunities in the fiat money system to forget all about what he wrote about when he was a young man. And then, as you say, this interview, he admits that the Federal Reserve is basically untouchable. It does whatever it wants.
That's private. It's all it is. It's not federal because it's not American. It's owned by offshore banks, and the reserve because of any gold or anything that was in there that was actually able to back up the dollar is not there anymore.
That's right. That's right. And part of the scam was to call it federal, to mislead the public into thinking that it was actually a government agency, and it's just one of the many aspects of keeping the public in the dark about the way it really works. Because, as Henry Ford said, if they knew, there would be a revolution before the morning.
And it's like the Patriot Act. It's how they word it. If you don't like the Patriot Act, you're not patriotic. Well, the act's actually the opposite of patriotism. Actually, the Patriot Act.
That's right, and the isn't it more than a little bit suspicious that the Patriot Act was written before 9/11?
Oh,
that they knew darn well what they were doing. They needed a pretext, some event, some cataclysmic event to usher in the Patriot Act. And as you said, it's the acronym is. The acronym, I can't remember what it's called, but I think the USA actually stands for United. I forget, but it's very Orwellian.
That reminds me, never let a good crisis go to waste. I forgot who said that one.
Exactly, that's exactly right.
By the way, talk about the law requiring to pay tax. That's what I got for when I watched Aaron Russo's America Freedom of Fascism. So we have to pay tax according to rule code that was like federal code to 50,000 pages. There actually is one, but the question is, should we? What do you think?
Well, yeah, and it was certainly a very interesting to have worked with Aaron Russo on that movie. He interviewed me ahead of time, I guess to see if I was real, and apparently determined that I was, and. So it was really interesting to have been a part of that whole thing, and it was very, it really educated millions and millions of people. But I kind of look at it like this: the IRS is an 800-pound gorilla that is out there enforcing the income tax. Okay, and so even if people find the truth that most Americans aren't required to pay the income tax, there's still that 800-pound gorilla out there that's going to sit on you, until you can't breathe. And no amount of arguing about what the law is or what the truth is going to stop the 800-pound gorilla from sitting on you. So I don't like to encourage people to take on the IRS one-on-one.
It's almost, I'm not saying suicide, but like legally.
Yeah. I think you have, a person has to have their eyes wide open, and if they do enough study, and of course I could, when you want me to, I could give some possible resources that people could go to. But if you do enough study and you feel comfortable that you really can understand, how the gorilla works, how the 800-pound gorilla does what it does, some people have made a decision to stop filing tax returns and paying income tax because they find that they're not required to, and they've also determined ways that they can stay out of the reach, out of the grip of that 800-pound gorilla. But it's not an easy task. As you mentioned earlier, there's been 100 years for the Federal Reserve and the federal government to create this web of bureaucracy, and to where they can seize bank accounts at the snap of a finger. They can put a lien out there that can take all the equity out of your
forfeiture
home.
as well. Like that's that Donald Scott case. Also, I was thinking about. I don't know if you heard of it.
I'm sorry, which case is that?
Donald Scott, where this guy used to own a ranch somewhere in a national park, in the middle of a national park, and they lied and they shot the guy, and then his wife, widow, now still lives there, but. Which and people don't realize that's asset forfeiture. That means that it doesn't even have to be proven that's real to take away your property. And not only that, you could also be tried secretly without you knowing.
Right. They will do a civil action against the property, and they can seize the property without even with just barely probable cause. Or a warrant. They don't even bother to get a warrant. They just seize it, and then they can do what's called administrative seizure, or they could try to do a judicial forfeiture. But the problem is that you're basically innocent until proven guilty. They take the property first, and then if that was a significant amount of property to your net worth, and you can't get your hands on it, then they basically deprived you of the ability to defend yourself because they've taken the very property you might use to pay for your defense.
Wow. And do you know anything about Irwin Schiff? He's still Irwin Schiff went to jail. He wrote the book The Federal Mafia. He's there for a few more years. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yes, no, I know Irwin, and he's one of the examples of how someone who is innocent or does not deserve to have been accused of a criminal offense, and yet they put him away for many, many years. I don't know if you're familiar, that he's got a son, Peter Schiff, who's actually pretty well known in financial circles. But yeah, they railroaded Irwin into prison. They mentioned, of course, Irwin was in Aaron Russo's movie, and they mentioned how the judge in Irwin Schiff's criminal trial said that I will not allow the law in my courtroom.
That's stupid.
And that's really what happened, and that's one of the ways that the Department of Justice and the IRS make sure that they railroad you into prison. They don't allow you to properly defend yourself. And so it's basically like WWF or the what do they call that fighting where you don't have any gloves?
Boxing.
Well, boxing, any kind of sport like that, where they tie your hands behind your back and tie up your feet and say, "Go ahead, defend yourself," kind of thing. That's what it's like in court, where they deprive you of your ability to defend yourself, and then they gloat. The government gloats over the fact that they convicted you, but they didn't allow you an ability to defend yourself in the first place.
Well, and that's really messed up. And the judge cannot get in trouble or anything, so that's even worse.
Right. The judges have been given wide discretion, as they call it, to make all these judgment calls during the trial. And in my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of lawyers and people associated with the courts, the judges act they basically help the prosecutor. They don't sit there as a neutral arbiter between the two sides. They side with the prosecutor against the defense. And so it really is an uphill battle, to try to show that you were innocent or that you shouldn't have been prosecuted in the first place.
And as far as, well, so what about the down where this former engineer for NASA, I think he testified in court that the votes are rigged 51-49%, but nobody's in trouble. Yeah, this is on videos too. I don't know.
Is this the clip that's in the Aaron Russo movie or another one?
Yeah, that one. It should be that one. Yeah.
Yeah, they had like some kind of a commission that was investigating electronic voter fraud, and this particular expert was testifying about how he could create or hack the program, the software, in order to achieve any result that they wanted. And of course, that was years ago, right? Aaron Russo's movie came out like in 2006, so we're almost 10 years later from that. And so you can only imagine what what they're able to do to manipulate the electronic voting.
Of course, because people still think that we're in charge. We call the shots, but like it's sad. I don't even know what happened really to Aaron Russo, but in my opinion, I think they killed him. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to say. I mean, I know I knew him pretty closely, and he was in remission. He had testicular cancer. And he was in remission during the time when he was making the movie. And then once the movie was released, the cancer came back. So, whether that was somebody,
with the
spicing his food with something, or I don't know. But I mean, he certainly had the cancer before he even made the movie. And whether there was something done to make him sicker, I don't know. He went to get treatment in Germany at one point, but he had so much more to give. But it was really sad that he wasn't around to give all. He had a ton more on his plate. I don't know if you remember from the movie America, Freedom to Fascism that it actually said Part 1. He intended to make a sequel.
Maybe in the future somebody will make it, hopefully. But what about the 16th Amendment? How it's interpreted? Because isn't it how Congress got interpreted, like the tax? Because obviously, which rule in the law code says we have to pay a tax? It's in the 50,000 page one. It said one. It's like,
well, you kind of a double question there, but I'll start with the 16th Amendment. There's really solid evidence to indicate that the amendment was never ratified in the first place. However, over the last 5 to 10 years especially, the courts have been very good at neutralizing or making it as if that doesn't matter, that it's been ratified and we're going to treat it as ratified, and we're not going to hear any more arguments or see any more evidence that it never was ratified. So that's fine with me and fine with many people, because even if it was ratified, the 16th Amendment did not expand federal taxing power. And there are numerous Supreme Court cases that say just that. So that's not my opinion or anyone's opinion other than the U.S. Supreme Court, that the 16th Amendment did not expand federal taxing power any more than the feds had to tax before the 16th Amendment. And so, well, what is that power? Well, they have the power to tax incomes without apportionment, but as an excise tax. And so what happened was, that few people know about, is that the amendment was, allegedly ratified in 1913, and there was immediately these income tax acts that were passed in 1913, 1914. Then in 1916, there was a Supreme Court case called the Bruchaber case, And interestingly enough, the Supreme Court basically ruled that, hey, you can't tax as broadly as you thought you could with the 16th Amendment. And so what the Congress had to do was retract what it thought would be the carte blanche ability to tax all Americans. And they retrenched and retracted the law to only tax non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. And then over the decades since 1916, the Treasury Department, the IRS, the Congress have basically obscured the fact that the income tax applies to either non-resident aliens, foreign corporations, or Americans who work or live abroad, outside of the country. And so, for example, in the law, where it used to explicitly refer to a non-resident alien or a foreign corporation, now the law just uses the word individual. Well, you can see where the word individual is very generic and bland, and people would think, well, hey, I'm an individual, you're an individual, everybody's an individual. But just changing the term to individual doesn't mean necessarily that the law just covers everyone or every American. It only covers non-resident aliens and foreign corporations or Americans who are working abroad. But when you look at the tax laws today as they're written and not look at what they have always said, then that's how the IRS gets away with fooling people into thinking that they are the individual that's required to pay the federal income tax. There's some really excellent articles on a website called Truth Attack. If your listeners go to truth-attack.com, or they go to a search engine and type in Innocence Revealed. That's INNOCENCE, Innocence Revealed. There's a couple websites where they'll explain what I'm talking about, because of course I can only give you so much detail in a 1-hour show. But that's it in a nutshell. The 16th Amendment did not expand federal taxing power, so says the Supreme Court over and over and over again. And the tax laws have never embraced the average American living in America and working here. But the way the IRS and the Treasury Department have fooled the people is by changing the terms from something very descriptive, like non-resident alien or foreign corporation, to individual, so that people will think that, oh, well, everybody's an individual, so everybody's got to pay the tax.
Wait, so what exactly is the law that makes you that apparently it's a 50,000 page book, which I don't know if I'm sure it must be a really big book. Well, do you know about the big book? Because you're required to pay taxes, and it's going right to the pockets of the corporations. So.
Well, there's a couple big books, so to speak. One is called the Internal Revenue Code, and the federal laws are broken down into individual codes. Okay, and I believe there are 50 of them, 50. And so Title 26, the 26th title of the United States Code, is the Internal Revenue Code. So, for example, Title 18 of the U.S. Code is the Criminal Code, and Title 27 deals with excise taxes. So each title has its own purpose. And so Title 26 is commonly known as the Internal Revenue Code. Sometimes the acronym reference is IRC for Internal Revenue Code. But that'd be one of the so-called big books that you could go to for some answers. You can go right on the internet. Somebody goes to a search engine and they type in section 6001 or section 6011, that'd be 6011, or section 6012, or section 1. Those will take you to websites that actually show the text of these various statutes or laws. Another big book that is important is the Code of Federal Regulations. And that's also referred to as Title 26 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acronym for that is CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. And so sometimes you'll see references to CFR, and but the CFR has the similar sequence to the U.S. Code. So you might see in the CFR a section 1.6001, and that means that there's a regulation that's going to further explain section 6001 of the Internal Revenue Code.
Oh, man.
So if somebody types in Code of Federal Regulations, you can also get some, into a search engine, you can get some more information on how that works.
Wow. But by the way, who runs the Federal Reserve that we're going to besides the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds? Do you know who runs the Federal Reserve? Because this money is going to them. It's not going to where we think it's going. We're actually giving money to them involuntarily.
Yeah, I mean, a way that I like to explain it that makes it pretty simple, because it helps me to understand things when they're simple also. But it'd be like most people know what a credit card advance is, right? If you have a credit card and they send you those checks that you can fill out, and so let's say you already have a big balance on your credit card and you're making minimum payments, and then they send you those checks that you can fill out for $2,000 or $5,000, and you just keep writing those checks because they keep sending them to you, and your balance on your credit card statement keeps going up and up and up and up and up. But meanwhile, you only make $30,000 a year or $50,000 a year, but pretty soon the balance on your credit card, because you've been writing these checks and buying stuff with it, the balance on your credit card is $50,000 or $100,000, and the interest rate is 18, 19, 20%. Well, if you're just making a minimum payment on your credit card, you can realize how the balance is just going to skyrocket, right? Because it's not only going to be the balance based on what you bought with all those checks, but it's going to be the interest that's compounded on the balance. And so meanwhile, you're only making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, and you can only afford the minimum payment. Well, you're never going to pay off the principal. You're just paying interest on a debt that continues to grow.
It will never be paid back, though. Besides derivatives and stuff we've been signed on to, it will never be repaid. I don't know why people tolerate this.
Exactly. So it's the same thing with our monetary system. The federal government, the U.S. government, borrows, hundreds and hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars, spends it, and then we get stuck with the bill. But the thing is, they borrow so much money in comparison to what we, as potential taxpayers or taxpayers are able to pay back, that we can never even touch the principal, and we can barely pay the interest on the principal because the debt grows so exponentially, each passing year. And, your listeners will probably be familiar with every year the Congress has to approve an increase to the debt ceiling. Well, that increase has to be done, at least as far as the Congress is concerned, because if they can't borrow more money to pay the interest on the ever-expanding debt, then the economy will collapse, because the economy is run based on borrowed money. So if you stop borrowing money, the economy will contract, and the economy will therefore collapse.
Well, and that reminds me of Woodrow Wilson when he said, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is now controlled by a system of credit. We are no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and the rest of a small group of dominant men." 1919. I don't know if he was blackmailed. This theory online that I researched, he was blackmailed by a Jewish man or something like that for having an affair with his wife or something. So he was like blackmailed to sign it. I'm not sure. No.
I've never heard that, but I know he certainly had regret for having signed the Federal Reserve Act and ushered in this horrible system, which now 100 years later we are seeing the fruits of, where everyone's in debt and the debt is only continuing to grow.
It's best that the dollar like just dies, right? Pretty much.
I don't know about that, but I'm just saying that the borrowing process is what keeps the economy going, because every dollar that you have in your pocket or I have in my pocket or that's in the bank accounts,
monopoly money,
was borrowed into existence. It was borrowed from a borrower from a bank or from the federal government borrowing into existence. So if those loans were paid back, there'd be no money left in circulation, because that's where all the money came from loans. So if you pay back the loans, there's no money left in the economy.
Well, and isn't like I saw a picture comparing the dollar and the monopoly dollar, so it's pretty much the same thing. Because the dollar is not backed by gold or so, where something should be backed of, and somewhere in the Constitution it says it. So the dollar is just a piece of paper since the gold standard died.
Right. And the value, I've seen graphs that indicate that, these are graphs probably 10 years old. I think that even Freedom to Fascism features a graph that shows that the dollar was worth 4 cents of what it was decades earlier. And, that makes sense, right? We all struggle to we pay more for our food, for our lodging, put a roof over our heads. And inflation, which the Federal Reserve claimed, they claimed with the Federal Reserve Act that they were going to be able to control inflation and actually, do better by the people. But of course, what it's really about is purposely inflating the money supply, because again, that's the only way that interest can be paid on the debt. They have to lend us money to pay interest on the debt, and that's why the principal never goes down. It will never be paid off.
Pay that back,
it'll only grow.
But isn't it true that Russia paid that back like in 2006 or something? 2006 they paid or something like that. They paid off any debt.
I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're saying. Russia paid back a debt?
Yeah, it was something similar to a situation here, but it says Russia paid back debt. I think the site was Political Velcraft or something like that. But like,
not familiar with that.
But I do know Iceland. It was actually Well, I don't know if you know the situation on Iceland where they actually had the kitchenware revolution. It's a peaceful revolution they had, and they actually like arrested the bankers. 3 of them, like literally pulled out of the plane and. They put new people in the government, rewrote their constitution. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I did hear about Iceland. Yes. I did hear about that.
Yet the mainstream media does not report it, so people don't even know what the hell we're talking about.
Right. No, Iceland, the people of Iceland
are the happiest people.
Took it to those bankers like they should, and we should do the same.
But I'm saying that like they're the happiest people. How like when you're free from the New Lord Cabal, how can you not be happy?
Exactly.
By the way, how come action isn't taken against this? So it's like it's a scam, it's a screw job. Why do people just tolerate it? Are they like too distracted? Like what's going on?
Well, my theory is that me being, almost 52 years old, I lived during a time when there was no internet, and before the internet, there was so much more control over the media. Back when I was a kid, there was three networks: CBS, NBC, and ABC. Wow. And you get all your news and all your entertainment from those three networks. And the newspapers were owned by, either those networks or companies that all they did was own media outlets. And so all the information that you would get was controlled. And so I think really what happened is the bankers and the corporations knew very well that they had to control information so that the people would not be aware of what was really going on. So from 1913 until, basically 1993, or thereabouts, when I recall the internet was really starting to take hold. What is that, like 80 years of a head start where the American people were basically unaware, uneducated, uninformed about what was really going on. So meanwhile, there's this, very sticky web that's been put around us, and it's very difficult to undo 80 years of this bureaucracy and red tape that's been painting around us. I think it can be done. I think we can throw it off, but it's going to take longer for the American people to get educated and informed. Yeah, and of course,
if you threw the overboard like 50, 60 years, so that would take you that much time or even longer to undo the damage and like fix the mess that was caused.
Yeah, I mean, of course, with the internet, and the longer we can keep it free, people are learning very, very quickly, and I think that's what has the powers that be worried, and that's why they will have these false flag events like 9/11, so that they can, get the control back, and of course, all the internet control that they want to exercise, and all the ways that they can try to control the data and information that reaches our senses.
But like I can't believe people don't even like obey the Constitution. Like they don't go by the Constitution. They will give you answers like, oh, it's the law or it's policy. So I get tired of that when I hear it's policy this, policy that. Like I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think there's an old saying, there's some old sayings like freedom isn't free, and I think it was Benjamin Franklin who was asked, what have you given us when the Constitutional Convention and the founders had basically, they were done putting their ink to paper, and a woman asked Benjamin Franklin, well, what have you given us? And he said, a republic if you can keep it.
Oh yeah.
And of course, what he meant by that was that a republic has to be tended to. It has to be monitored. It has to be, you can't just go about your life and not pay attention to what's going on in your government, or else the corrupt people will take control of it and enslave you. And that's basically what's happened, or has almost happened.
Of course, they want to take away your guns. It's not to stop crime, it's just to disarm the people. A bunch of people who are gun owners, and the done research could tell you that, they want to just fully enslave you, and so no way you could fight back in the last resort with like any gun that could possibly help. Like, it's like it is wanting to enslave the people, but like they don't realize that. How can you actually like explain to people?
No, you're absolutely right. I don't know why people trust the government, but there are still enough people who do, or they trust the two-party system when the Republicans and the Democrats really have very little difference between them. But again, people are waking up rather quickly that the government can't be trusted, and that the government is abusing that trust with scandals like Fast and Furious, and gun control, and all these ways that these lying politicians are doing everything they can to enslave us and ensure that we'll never escape from that slavery. So it's kind of a sprint to the finish line, and I'm hoping that the American people will get to the finish line first.
Wow. By the way, why did we give up the gold standard? Because apparently, well, at least in case of Switzerland, there might have been some people in the parliament. It's just a theory out there. Some people in the parliament were actually killed in broad daylight, and it's almost as if Switzerland was blackmailed to give up the gold standard, which they did months later after that assassination. But you can't find that story on Google. I don't know if it did really happen. But
yeah, I'm not sure about that. I know in the U.S. it was basically a piecemeal process. After the Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, you could still find silver certificates and gold certificates. In other words, the paper money that was backed by gold and silver was still circulated. And maybe you or your listeners have seen at the coin store or collectors have copies of it looks like a dollar bill, just like the ones we have today, but at the bottom it says redeemable by the bearer on demand. So somebody could take that bill into the Treasury Department or a mint and exchange it for an equivalent amount of silver or gold. And those were around through the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, but I believe it was in the early 70s when the monetary system was completely taken off the gold standard. So it was like a 50-year piecemeal, slow process, and I think it was necessary. The bankers realized it was necessary because it takes that long for generations to forget and to be unaware of what the previous generation enjoyed. So, I was born in 1963, and so we won't, in the 70s, I was only 10 years old, and, then there were no more of these bills that said redeemable, by bearer on demand, where you could actually exchange the paper money for gold or silver. It just wasn't around. I never saw it until I was in my 30s. So it's that slow process. You probably heard of the metaphor where the frog, if he's put into just lukewarm water and then the water is turned up slowly, very, very slowly, well, then the frog won't realize that it's getting hotter and hotter and won't jump out.
Of course, and eventually it will die and they will not realize it.
Right.
So basically that's what's going on around us. So we're getting used to this, just sitting laid back, not asking questions, not exposing corruption when it's right in front of you. So when the real stuff comes and hits the fan, everybody's all screwed.
Right. Well, that's the job, and that's why it's so important, that you're doing what you're doing, Chris, where you're trying to educate people, and every person that's out there trying to educate others is very valuable. And you may not be reaching as many people as Rush Limbaugh or any of these big talk show hosts, but you're also out there trying to tell the truth, and you'd be surprised. I learned that there was a problem because a lady named Devi Kidd was an activist who was getting on the radio, not getting paid for what she did, but just donating her own time to waking up her fellow Americans. And I was one of the people that she awakened, and I just happened to be working for the IRS at the time, and I researched what she said was true, and I didn't believe it at first, but when I saw the evidence, I couldn't help but believe it. And, that's the reason that I left the IRS, because I found the evidence that indicated that they were lying to the American people about their income tax obligations.
What is this about tax honesty movement or I think it was We the People Foundation? Do you know anything about those?
Yeah, the We the People Foundation was founded by a guy named Bob Scholes um, in New York. And, I can't remember the website anymore, but if somebody just types in We the People Foundation, they can get information on it. It used to be givemeliberty.org, I believe was the website. I don't know if that still works. But back when I resigned from the IRS in 1999, I joined up with that We the People Foundation, and we had a bunch of press conferences and seminars, and we tried to have a hearing with Congress. And you may recall that some of those efforts were depicted in the Freedom to Fascism movie. So you can probably get some information just by rewatching the movie. Bob Schultz is in the movie, as well as some of the marches that we did in Washington, D.C. That scene where we're all in the IRS building and the guy says no cameras and he's trying to push the cameraman away. That was some of the things that we did with the We the People Foundation.
By the way, recently I don't know if Congress will really do it, like audit the Federal Reserve. According to Ron Paul, I personally like Ron Paul. What do you think? You think Congress will stop, being afraid of, because they're being blackmailed probably by agencies, so like they can't really do much. But like, can they really audit the Federal Reserve? I don't think it's gonna happen anytime soon.
Well, they can, but I think the House has passed a Federal Reserve audit bill more than once.
Twice.
But up until recently, the Senate was controlled by the Democrats, and I personally think that was just an excuse. I think now that the Republicans are in control, they'll do everything they can to not pass a Federal Reserve Audit Act. But I'm not sure if I heard recently that maybe they did actually pass it with both houses. But of course, I really doubt that Obama's going to sign it.
Of course, because he doesn't want to be JFK. So,
right.
So, but isn't it true that if the president does veto it, Congress can't vote on it again? If it's enough votes, it becomes law.
Right. They'd have to have what they call a supermajority, where it's veto proof. That I think it's 2/3. That then it wouldn't matter if the president wanted to veto it because it would pass through without his signature. But it's pretty difficult to get any legislation to have that kind of majority. So I think an audit the Fed bill would be difficult. But I don't want to sound like I'm not hopeful. Again, it's all about the numbers. The more Americans that recognize there's a problem and get in touch with their legislator and say, if you don't clean this up, I'm going to put somebody in who will.
But what if we do want to do that? And they're like, yeah, sit down and shut up. So what do we do? How can you just like peacefully, like couldn't you indict people if they're not doing their job? Because they represent us, not the corporations.
Right, and you're right. I mean, if you're one person, like let's say a congressman comes to your town, and you're one person out of 100 that's asking about the Federal Reserve or about this monetary mess that we're in, sure, they're going to tell you to sit down. But if 40 out of the 100, or even 25 out of the 100, stand up and have the same question, well, that's a different story. And so, that's really all I can recommend or urge people to do is we have to grow the group of us who are not only knowledgeable but wanting to, get in the face of our representatives and make sure that they do something. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I do believe we've made a lot of progress, certainly since 1999 when I left the IRS and joined the good side.
Wait, so basically you're not working anywhere. You're just just at home. You're not working any agency. I don't know about Freedom Above Fortune. That's one of your main sites.
Yeah, there's agentfortruth.com
Oh yeah.
and freedomabovefortune.com are my websites. But no, I don't just sit at home or I don't work for the government anymore.
Oh.
I basically use my accounting skills and experience to do what's called forensic accounting, which is basically reconstructive accounting. For people that have businesses and people can get in trouble in terms of not keeping a close eye on their revenue and expenses and payroll and whatever things they might have. They get out of whack, and they need somebody who can get them back on track. So that's basically what I do these days.
Oh, so anybody could just come to you if you like they need help with their taxes, basically, because it's gonna be tax season April. It's like 3 months.
Well, I don't prepare tax returns like your typical phone book CPA, but I do consult with people now and then about situations and things like that. So you can another website is josephbanister.com, JOSEPHBANISTER, josephbanister.com. But at agentfortruth.com, there's a section called Become an Agent for Truth, and there's also must-see videos. Those are a couple sections on agentfortruth.com that people might want to take a look at.
Wait, you said something about CPA. You're not like a CPA, so it means you're not certified, and like they took away that license, or like what is up with that? That's
right. I was a CPA for 15 years, so I earned the certification initially. I possessed all the experience and testing requirements, and then I was a CPA for 15 years. But the IRS really abhors having credible people telling the public something different than what the IRS tells the public. So they began working on trying to discredit me. And so one of the ways they did was to make up these allegations that I was acting disreputably with clients. And what's interesting is the clients didn't complain. The clients were completely happy with my work and my representation, but the IRS complained about my work and my representation. So, that's what I mean about the 800-pound gorilla always finding a way to
or the elephant
try to
in the
harm
room.
you. What's that?
The elephant in the room. I guess that.
Right. Right. So, I'm doing okay. I've survived, but I did have an opportunity to gain a lot of experience in the way that they operate ahead of time. And so, that with, of course, God's providence and God's protection, I'm still here, still doing okay. And but the IRS has tried to discredit me. And, people are going to have to make up their own minds, whether they think Joe Banister is telling them the truth or the IRS is telling them the truth. I think they'll know.
You have experience. You have clear intel. You used to work there. So for that, it's crazy. It's stupid not to listen to you.
Well, I encourage people to have an open mind.
And research.
But yeah, I think that once they look at all the evidence, they're going to see that the IRS and the federal government has been lying to them and stealing out of their pockets for about 100 years.
Wow. Joe, before you go, what would you like to tell every listener, everybody who's just listening and like?
Well, encourage your listeners to be hopeful, to be good examples. Keep cheerful, keep hopeful. Don't get in despair. Freedom isn't free. It's hard work, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to keep trying, and we need to grow our numbers of informed Americans. And just like you said, Iceland is a perfect example, a recent
they're
example.
Free from the cabal. Why not us?
Yeah, we can do it. So, encourage people to go to agentfortruth.com, check out the videos, and become an agent for truth there. And I really appreciate the opportunity, Chris, that you've given me to talk to your listeners.
No problem, Joe. Hopefully I can have you on in the future, like in a few months, maybe.
I'd be happy to come back. That'd be great.
All right, thank you, Joe.
All right, Chris, you take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow, about the taxes. I'm not saying you shouldn't pay them. You to quote Aaron Russo, you may get hurt. So I'm not saying you shouldn't pay. So if you have to pay them, just pay them. But always keep in mind, should you? Or am I really helping my country, or am I just feeding the pockets of rich billionaires who really don't give a F about this place? And we'll do whatever it takes to destroy it, whether it's giving millions to have to violent protests like Soros did, 33 million, or to start stuff in Ukraine, which he admits also he's done, George Soros. Would you give money to people that work with him that are evil, or would you do it to honest people? Would you give the money to honest people who really care about the country? It's your choice. It's our choice. And hopefully in the future, people will make the right choice. Because it's not fair I have to suffer because of stuff you do. Because we all suffer in the end. And the children, our progeny, and everybody else. So, what will it be, America?